Hello, guys and gals, and welcome. So it's been like, 9 days so far. I wanted to save this video until I had a better understanding of the game. I don't want to give you guys like a false impressions. You're like, hey, I love this game, and then like comes out, find out like a week later, oh, I hated it entirely. But like, I feel like I've got a pretty good impression so far. So today, let's go over what I think of the game. We're going to talk about all the various mechanics, leveling up characters, campaign, end game stuff, the whole 9 yards. So let's crack into it. As you can see, I have a level 73 Gemling Legionnaire. I'm also utilizing a Sorceress, which I've just started leveling back up through the campaign. And then I also have a Necromancer. I haven't really done much with her yet. Let's hop on to my Gemling Legionnaire real quick. And let's start covering some of the things. So first off, there's a lot of positives to talk about, so I kind of feel like we should start out with the negatives. The negatives in the game are kind of hard to see, and it's not until you start to get into like end game and some of the more ridiculous activities that the negatives start to appear. One of the negatives right away that we can talk about is that it crashes a lot with like DirectX 12. I had to switch over to Vulkan, and I'm kind of starting out with this one also as just a way to like, tell you guys how you can fix it. I tried to like DirectX 12, tried to DirectX 11. Let me give you the short and the sweet of this. DirectX 12 has more like graphical textures and like it looks fancier. However, it also crashes a lot. Like I had a lot of errors, and the errors specifically said like DirectX 12 failed to draw texture, or DirectX 12 like failed to find texture file, or something along those lines. And there was hundreds of them. I tried to switch to DirectX 11, but DirectX 11 is literally worse in every way than DirectX 12, and it also still crashed. Also, the frame rate of the game was absolutely horrible. So I ended up switching over to Vulkan, thanks to one of my viewers who was like, give Vulkan a try. It's actually pretty good. And lo and behold, it basically fixed all my problems with the crashes. So if you are having constant crashes with the game and you're just like not having a good time in general from a very bad and poor sort of like stability there, not everyone is, but I am. I'm running a 3090, by the way, so to give you guys an idea of my setup, I have a 3090 RTX. I'm also utilizing 128 gigabytes of RAM. I have a 5800X3D CPU. So it's not exactly a, slouch of a computer. It's actually a pretty good computer. And still crashing a lot with this game. But ever since switching to Vulkan, all my problems have disappeared. Hopefully they fix DirectX 12 eventually, because apparently DirectX 12 has some more fancy doojanks in it that make your graphics look even prettier, as you can see as I'm spamming my grenades all over the place. Now, another negative that I'm definitely going to bring up right away is this. I don't exactly think that this is the worst thing in the world, and it's actually a lot easier to peruse than the previous system with Path of Exile 1, which, just to preface this entire video, I really did not like Path of Exile 1, and the passive skill tree was definitely a part of that, and they have fixed the passive skill tree quite a bit in PoE 2, so that it's much more approachable in terms of like how you path through it. They taken out a lot of the health nodes, and they've made it a lot easier to go through it without making a lot of wrong choices, basically. There are some negatives, however, about this passive tree still. The first, of course, is how it's presented, which is it's overwhelming for a lot of people when they first see it, and I can totally understand it. It's not necessarily that like it's a bad thing in terms of like, oh, I can't do this, but it's just a lot to take in the first time you see the passive tree, and I can totally understand that. Also, they added a search function, but the search function is woefully inadequate. Like, say, for instance, you wanted to search for something like energy shield, as an example. It's not like something pops up on the left-hand side here with a list of all of the energy shield entries, or, like, in general makes it easy to see them. In fact, you pretty much just have to look around and try and find these like pulsing nodes. And while they do pulse, they pulse at such a like low intensity and frequency that sometimes as you're pathing through, you might miss them. Now, a lot of the times when you're dealing with ones that are all over the place, right? It's a little bit easier to see. But when you start dealing with something that's not all over the place, like, I don't know, let's say, trying to think of one that's like not really all over the place. Like, let's talk about cold penetration. So you put in cold penetration and you start looking around the board and you're trying to find cold penetration and not really. Okay, there we go. We got ones right here. So there's cold penetration. Or penetrate. It's, I guess, penetrate and penetration are both the same thing. Giggity. It's kind of difficult to search this thing. Like, there's a lot of quality of life features they could do here. First off, obviously, is the search system could be way better than what they currently have it access to. It could be presented better. Like, I don't know why I can't just like zoom out of the entire board. Also, like these icons could get bigger as you zoom out or something. Like there's like a couple different ways that it could be approached. A lot of the times you can't even tell what these icons are at a distance. Like you have to like zoom in on them. They have these like individual icons that show off, you know, like what they are. Like for instance, you start to get to the point where you know that this one here with the red on the right and the green on the left, or the red on the left and the green on the right, with the man, the silhouetted man in there is basically evasion and armor, right? And then like when you zoom out, you know, as you're going through, if you don't have them highlighted, they're not as easy to see. This is probably one of the easiest to see and understand because it's so clearly designed to like be seen from a distance. But a lot of the other ones, not so much. Like you just you can't really tell what they are like at a distance. You have to hold your mouse over every single node and you have to figure out where all of the nodes are. It's just this whole tree is a giant negative in my opinion. After you've figured out where things are, after you've sat here for hours, you know, like holding your mouse over each one of the things, searching through here to find specific stuff, like typing in bleed and then finding all the bleed options and then looking at seeing which one of the bleeds that you want. I mean, you can eventually get a handle on where you are. I mean, it's like living in a big city and you have no clue where anything is. And like over time, you eventually start to understand where everything is. But like they could make this tree so much easier, and I don't know. I just don't know why they don't. The search option itself is like so basic, but then like I'm telling you, the easiest thing in the world to add to this, one of the things that would make this a whole lot easier, is just simply adding a left-hand panel here that pops up. So if you search for bleed, it's going to put every single node with bleed here. You click on the node, it just automatically takes you to where it is. So like for instance, let's say I was like over here and I searched for bleed and then I clicked on a specific node, it would just immediately center me and zoom me in on that specific node, and like bam, now I've clicked on bloodletting. So I don't have to like sit here and search around the entire tree looking for this barely pulsing mess, which is annoying. Another thing that I would do is make it a lot more obvious if you don't want to put the search function in there where you can click on the options. This barely pulsing like thing when you're zoomed out like this can sometimes be missed, especially if it's only one node. When it's a cluster of nodes, it's a lot easier to see. But when it's only one node and you're searching around the tree like this, it becomes a lot harder to see the pulsing nodes. Maybe even some sort of directional indicator. Like, I hate to say it, but it's so big, you almost need like a directional indicator to point you in the direction of the passive tree, which is just. So some more negatives. We're starting out with negatives, right? So we'll not get into the positives just yet. The end ascendancy trials. I got a lot to say about the end ascendancy trials. I think they're pretty garbage, in my opinion. I don't even know. Like, I've played a lot of games. I've played a lot of roguelites. I've played a lot of ARPGs. I've played a lot of everything, and I can't, for the life of me, understand what they're trying to get at here. There's a lot of negatives with this particular like system. The Temple of Chaos is one of the two endgame activities that you earn your ascendancies with. And this particular one is based on the idea of choosing debuffs which follow you throughout the run. And the more debuffs that you have, the worse things get. The only problem is that some of the debuffs are so crippling that you literally cannot choose them because they will straight up brick your run immediately. To give you an idea of some of these ridiculous debuffs, there are things that like strip your entire energy shield from your character, which if you're an energy shield character just completely breaks your run. There's this Val construct that falls into the arena. Huge, monstrous thing, like as big as this statue, if not bigger. And it starts shooting lightning all over the place. Now, it's not so bad by itself, but a lot of the times it falls on your head and just kills you, which makes no freaking sense. Like, I don't know why they do that. And then on top of this, when it falls in a boss arena, the boss can literally push it around like it's a soccer ball or like a beach ball. And if the Val construct touches you, it can literally just one-shot you if the boss pushes it into you, which is very easy for the boss to do because the boss is zipping all over the place, has a lot of mechanics that cause it to like transfer from one side of the arena to the other. So pushing this giant beach ball around of doom that can literally just one-shot you at any given time is ridiculous. Other things that brick the run are things that cause incredibly large amounts of lag. There are a lot of various traps and like firing abilities. Like there's turrets that fire lightning. There is there's a turret that fires fire. There's a pillar that stands in the center and like spins around with like 4 giant lightsabers made out of blood. And then like there's a whole bunch of other various traps and stuff like that. And by themselves, they're not really so bad. But when in combination with each other, they lag the game out something so fierce that you can't even play anymore. Like the frame rates drop from like 100 solid to like 15 to 10, if that, and it's constantly fluctuating. And it has to do with the sheer number of projectiles and things that are on the screen at any given time. Because obviously picking the traps and stacking the traps on top of each other just makes things worse and worse and worse until eventually the entire freaking run just crumbles to a screeching halt. There's also some absolutely stupid ones in there, like the lightning seals that just continue to spawn forever. They literally are infinite. They're basically these seals. They're kind of reminiscent of what's underneath of this statue. And if you step inside the seal, like these lightning bolts come down and do massive amounts of damage. Now, if you're an endgame character and you have like all your resistances sorted out, they're not as bad. But the problem is that if you're not an endgame character, which is most of the time when people are going through this, the seals basically just one-shot you. And they don't go away, and they don't stop spawning. And they're kind of like area denial. Like imagine if like a seal spawned here. All right, so you just can't step here anymore, right? All right, well then a seal spawns here, and then a seal spawns here, and then here, and 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 here, until you're like literally hugging the corner like for your life because you can't step on any of the seals because they don't go away on their own, and they also won't stop spawning. And eventually there's a seal under your feet here as well, and you have no choice but to try and run across the seals to get out out of danger. And the thing is that like they even spawn like when you can't see your character. So like if your character's hiding behind like a wall or something, the seals are still spawning under your feet, which means that you literally can die to something that you can't even see. And then there's a lot of just like really bad choices. The globules, for instance. There was another choice with the globules where literally when you kill a monster, these like floating globules start to follow you around the arena. Again, no timer on these. They just follow you forever. And they will keep following you until you hit them. Now, if it's just one globule, it's a really easy process to get rid of them. Basically, imagine, if you will, that this is the globule, right? And it's coming toward me. Oh, no. Well, you're going to run toward it, and you dodge through it, and boom. Like, you don't even get hit by it. It's actually pretty easy. Now, the problem comes into play when you have multiple globules. So this is a issue that I ran into as this particular character because I have the ability to kill monsters in a large, number. So I'm sitting there and I kill like 70, like monsters at one time, and there's all these globules that are all stacked on top of each other, but they're not like directly on top of each other. And so you run at them and you try to dodge roll through them, and as you can clearly see, like, I was still within range of the ones in the back, and if I dodge through at a certain range, I'm always going to get hit by some of them. And so my experience with the globules is that when there were only like one or two or three, like, it was no big deal. But when there was like 100, because that would often happen, because if you kill a large number of monsters in the stupid globules, they're kind of like impossible to avoid at that point. Like, there's just too many on the screen at any given time, and the too many on the screen lead to you getting hit eventually. And it's like they do a massive amount of damage when you have a large number of them, obviously. So if you've got like 100, and even if you dodge through them correctly, because they're all spread out in various ways, you're probably still going to get hit by 50 of them, which pretty much just results in an instant one-shot. I mean, are there some good options in the Chaos? Yes, there's some good options in there, some stuff that makes sense, but there also are ones that are just straight up crippling to any build that you would use. And when I say crippling, I mean like paraplegic in a wheelchair kind of crippling. I don't just mean like, oh, like Tanya Harding got hit in the kneecap and she still walks around just fine. I mean like you choose the option and it ends the run. Like, that's it. There's an option in there that has to do with me. It's projectile speed. It literally makes it so that all of your projectiles are 50% slower, and also that the radius of explosions is 50% smaller. And I chose the option thinking it wouldn't be that bad, and literally I went from being able to kill everything inside of the Chaos run to not being able to kill anything at all. Which just, it wasn't like it was just a negative that I could work around. It was an extremely bad negative that I could not work around. And that's been my case for a lot of the stuff in the Chaos runs, is that a lot of the stuff in the Chaos runs is so bad that a lot of the times you just can't work around it. Like, when they give you 50% negative defenses, like, it doesn't really hurt armor characters or evasion characters all that much, but you know what it does hurt? It hurts the energy shield characters. So like, when you lose 50% of your energy shield, that's a pretty big deal. Or, you know, when like, and if you choose it again, that's another 50% of your energy shield. Now you just have no energy shield left. So yeah, I can't particularly say that I enjoy the length of them either, like the length of the runs. I feel like the length of the Chaos runs might be one of my biggest reasons why I dislike doing them. Not necessarily that I don't like doing the runs, but more so that they're just overly long, and it feels like I have to invest a really large amount of time for often what turns out to be no reward. And then speaking of the Chaos rewards, I know I've moved on to the Trial of the Sekimas, but speaking of the Chaos rewards are often also trash. There are some really nice things that you can get inside my weapon right now. I currently have 2 gems. These are called topinates, I think. This one's a 30% increased elemental damage, and this one is a weapons penetrate 15% of elemental resistances. The topinates are really interesting, but the rest of the equipment that you get from the Chaos run is usually garbage. And it has to do with the fact that they are all corrupted. So everything that you get within the Chaos run is already pre-corrupted with a Val Orb. Corruption is a process that changes the item like in unpredictable ways, and usually is something that is reserved for the very end life of your item, which means that you have to wait until the item is like completed before you Val Orb it. Otherwise, it's usually not very useful. For instance, like with my crossbow right now, my crossbow is 20% increased quality. It has all of the 6 modifiers on it, so it has been exalted to the moon. As you can see, it says it has no more space for mods. And I have 2 sockets in it. I've put the socket, you know, the topinates in there. And so this item would be prepped for a Val Orb if I wanted to risk it, right? Well, not the items in the Chaos rewards. The items in the Chaos rewards are literally all already pre-corrupted, and then none of them have all the stuff that they need. They might have sockets, but most of them are just very poorly set up in terms of like what you can get out of them. Like, they have no quality. A lot of the times they'll have no sockets. I think even when they do have sockets, I can't remember. I don't think you can even put gems in the sockets, even if there are sockets to put gems into. Because I think once it's been corrupted, that's pretty much it, and you're not allowed to put any more anything in them. Like, for instance, take this bow as an example. This is a corrupted bow that probably came from a chaos run. And as you can see, it's 8% quality, so it's not 20%. It has no sockets, which so they cannot be added anymore. It only has 4 mods. And because it has 4 mods, you would think you would, want to put more mods into it. But the thing is that because it's corrupted, again, you can't put any more mods into it because it's already been pre-corrupted, right? So see, it's that failed to apply item, target is corrupted. So the equipment and things that come from the actual chaos runs are usually useless. I hate to say it, but they're usually just they're trash. Now, occasionally you might find something good, but the thing is that it has to come pre-good. In other words, it has to already be good when you get it, because you're not going to be able to do anything to it once you get it, because at that point, once it has been corrupted, like, it's done. Like, there is no changing it or adding modifiers or using chaos orbs on it or any of that stuff. So the loot that comes from the chaos runs is actually like pretty trash most of the time. It might act as a temporary upgrade at some point, but you're eventually going to get equipment that's way better than it because you can actually customize it, socket it, do all that stuff to it. And I'm kind of like going off on a tangent, but it's just kind of important to talk about that for the difficulty that chaos is giving you, the rewards that chaos is giving you seem kind of just terrible in comparison. Then we have the honor system. So the other trial, the trial of the Sekimas. The trial of the Sekimas is a strange one. The first time you encounter it, they really don't tell you not a dang thing about it. And there's really no explanation of what honor is, how honor works, how you can potentially make honor, better to your advantage. And let me just preface this by saying that you need honor resistance. So, just like you have fire resistance, lightning resistance, cold resistance, and chaos resistance, you need honor resistance. That's right, honor resistance. Let me go ahead and pull out one of my basic gems here. I know I've got at least some of these that I can throw in here. Let's just throw in like my highest one, 52. Now, on these things, they come with a number of trials. So in this particular case, as you can see, it's 2, which means it's 2 floors, which means you have to go through the entire thing twice. I honestly thought going through the entire thing once was already long and boring. But, yeah, they make you go through it twice, not just twice, but 3 times, not just 3 times, but there's also 4 times. And there's a different boss at the end of each floor. Now, you can put relics in here, and this is where you fix most of the problems with the honor system. And it has to do with honor resistance. As you can see, I have 30% honor resistance. I have 32% honor resistance. That's 62. And then I have another 15 here, so I am over the 75% honor resistance cap. Now, I do believe, and I'm not entirely sure about this, but I think some of the later levels actually do have kind of like a negative to honor resistance, so overcapping it might actually be good. But basically, honor resistance itself is pretty much required, because if you don't have it, the monsters will hit you for massive amounts of honor damage and take it all away in seconds. To put it in perspective, the first time I came in here with 0 honor resistance at around like a 60 run, a monster hit me and took off 1,000 honor in a single hit. In this particular case, I have 1,915 honor, and you can see that that is going to obviously be a pretty bad detriment for, the honor system in general, right? Like, losing 1,000 honor when you only have 2,000 in one hit is kind of ridiculous. Well, when you have honor resistance, it makes it so that you are less likely to die simply because you lose all of your honor. It actually makes it surprisingly easy to stay alive. And I'll show this off in just a second. I don't want to fail the thing just like this. But this was one of the tests where you basically just run around clicking on the crystals, and they tease you into fighting monsters, and they put like some yellow chests all over the place, which most of the time have nothing in them. Like this one here, they got like a blue chest, and oh look, it actually had something in it. Most of the time, they've got nothing in them. But the entire purpose of those chests is just to distract you, because they want you to stop and waste your time, because if you run out of time, it's an instant death, right? So in this particular case, you notice I have 1,915, but now I have honor resistance. So I'm going to let them smack on me a little bit. And you notice I'm only losing like little tiny amounts now, like 3. Let's get hit by this fireball. No, come here, Mr. Fireball. Aww. Come on, shoot me with a fireball, please. We're gonna, like, what the hell? Can you not hit me? Oh, there we go. As you can see, with honor resistance, the honor resistance takes care of a lot of this. Makes it a lot easier to avoid honor damage in general, and you don't take as much honor damage, like, from anything, for the most part. In fact, most of the time, ever since I've gotten honor resistance, my character has actually only died to actually dying, which is kind of surprising. Like, I actually died, my HP actually hit 0, and I died that way, and that ended the honor trial. So the honor system itself has gotten better once I added honor resistance. However, let's talk about something else that happened. So I tried to do a run in a group with 2 other people, and the honor system seems to be broken in a completely different way, which is that honor damage taken from any monster or any player is somehow being, like, reflected to the other players. So in one particular case, I had kind of low honor, and this was before we discovered honor resistance, and I was just kind of sitting over in the corner because I only had 200 honor left, and they were going to run the run without me, and then I'd catch up with them at the end. Well, every time that they got hit, my honor was going down. And I couldn't figure out exactly what was going on, but, like, they would get hit for 200 honor, and they would not take any damage. Instead, I would take honor damage. And so the party system was somehow transferring the damage from one player to another, which was unfortunate. And I ended up dying anyway, even while I wasn't being hit or near any monsters or any traps, just standing there, like, looking like a dummy as my honor just slowly retreated into nothingness. And this has been my case across the board with party systems in Path of Exile 2, and we can, like, shift over to Path of Exile 2 party systems at this point. Party systems are terrible in this game. I don't know what's going on with the party systems. I know that they had a patch problem in the beginning with the parties, like random people joining parties and stuff like that, something to do with the database error. But, like, joining a party is sometimes very difficult. Teleporting to the player in the party is sometimes very difficult. A lot of the times you can't even get on the same layer. So you'll be in the same area as each other, but you're not on the same layer or in the same instance, and you can't seem to get into the same instance, like, no matter what you do. Also, there's been several times where we were fighting a boss, and somehow we get, like, kicked out to the boss room or something, and then it won't let us back into the boss room. Like, we literally get kicked out to another zone, and then we try and teleport back, and it tells us that we're not allowed back in because we died, or something weird like that. And there were just so many situations where we just gave up, and we were just doing the same run together. I mean, I had one run where literally we both cleared the entire area together in the same party, but we were not in the same instance. And when I got to the boss, the boss killed me because I wasn't paying attention, and all of a sudden, as soon as the boss killed me, it just booted me to the other instance, and I didn't get to kill the boss. He had already killed the boss, and instead of being able to kill the boss, I was then just completely unable to kill the boss because for some reason or another, it had finally put us in the same instance together. The party system itself just seems to be absolutely broken in this game. It works sometimes, and then other times it just horribly doesn't work. I definitely do not recommend using parties inside of the Trial of Sekimas, because as of right now, it does seem to be horribly broken in the way that it just simply applies honor damage from one person to another person. It doesn't make any even sense either. You'd be like a 3-man party, and it'll pick one person, and all the honor damage will get shunted to one person in the party, and they won't even be like the party leader. It'll just be some random person in the group. And speaking of the Trial of Sekimas, it's just too long. I gotta say that, like, content like this is not attractive to me because of how ridiculously long it takes to complete. Obviously, as you're going through this, you choose room by room where you want to go, and you will just simply, make choices. Each choice either leads you to a good thing, a bad thing, a buff or a debuff, a vendor or a key, something of that nature. Once you've completed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rooms, you then fight a boss. The first boss isn't really that difficult, and he's kind of designed not to be because, of course, you know, that's your first trial that you're ever going to do. It's the one that gets you your first ascendancy points. And then after you beat this guy, if you have 2 floors, then you get to do it all over again. So another 6 rooms and another boss. And then if you have 3 floors, another 6 rooms and another boss. And if you have a 4th floor, then another 6 rooms and another boss. And literally at any point, if you die in this, you immediately go back to 0. You do get to put like your stuff in a stash at each floor's entrance. Like after you kill the boss, they give you like an opportunity to access your stash and throw some items in. Which is actually very helpful because you end up with a lot of loot. It's not very good loot most of the time, but I mean, it is stuff that you might want to take back for regal shards, things that you might want to take back for artificer's orbs, and so forth and so on. Superior items that you can get, blacksmith and armor scraps. It's somewhat useful. You occasionally find like exalt orbs and chaos orbs and stuff in here and things that might be useful. But one of the things that you find a lot in here is relics, which you're going to use for future trials. Speaking of the trials themselves, like the actual tokens have some sort of weird bug with them where they will tell you that you can get ascendancy points even when you can't. And it seems to have something to do with like where you are at that particular time. It's really quite weird. Like if you go back to the Act 2 trial of the Sekimas, for instance, like if you're back here in regular difficulty and you use your token at the trial of the Sekimas here, all your tokens will light up and they'll tell you that you can get your ascendancy points even when you can't. However, if you go to this one, the trial of the Sekimas in Act 2 Cruel, it'll tell you a different story, and it changes the writing on the tokens. And this has been my experience, is that a lot of the times with these tokens, they don't give you the proper information on whether or not you can actually get your ascendancy or not. And it does kind of suck to like see on the token that it says the wrong thing. I'm not exactly sure. Like, it's a new system, and I guess they probably just need to work on it. But let me see if I can replicate this for you real quick. It's been a minute. But, like, let me take out my tokens. And you can see right now that these tokens are too low to give me ascendancy skill points at this particular moment. However, if I go to a lower level area, and this has happened to me a couple times, like, say if I go to the Act 2 area, and let's go to the Sekimas in Act 2 instead. So we're going to travel to the Act 2 Sekimas. And they're still not showing it. But basically, let's try logging out to the character screen, and we'll log back in. I might not be able to get it to happen right this second, and maybe they fixed it. Maybe there's a little micro patch, and maybe they fixed the problem. But like occasionally I would hop in, and they would tell me that I was capable of getting the ascendancy points. I had a couple of them that were like in the 60s that said that they would work, but they obviously did not. And I can't get it to repeat itself here. But the system itself is supposed to let you know whether or not you can get ascendancy skill points with that particular token. And sometimes it tells you you can even when you can't, and sometimes it doesn't tell you you can even when you can, which is also kind of weird. I've had some that were high enough. According to everything I've been reading, it has to do with the number of trials. So, for instance, with the Dijin Biara, I'm pretty sure it has to do with specifically 3 trials. And I've had ones that say 3 trials that told me I couldn't get the ascendancy points. I've also had ones that were high enough with the chaos that also said the same thing, will not grant additional ascendancy points, that were also high enough. And it's kind of stupid. It's a stupid little system of not being able to know, because obviously there's a lot of time invested in these. And the time that's invested in these is, it's stupid to go into this and not precisely know whether or not you can get Ascendancy points with these particular tokens or not. I think it would be nice if they would just publish somewhere, maybe on like a web page or a forum post, the exact levels and number of trials required for each one of the Ascendancies, instead of us having to like figure it out for ourselves in advance. Because, as I said, the amount of time that you have to invest in these is stupid for the reward. I don't really feel like the rewards on these are worth it. They're overly difficult in a way which is long and boring for a reward which doesn't really mean a whole lot. And speaking of the rewards, we already talked about the rewards in the Chaos, and let's speak for a second on the rewards on the Djinn Biara, or the Trial of the Sekimas. The Trial of the Sekimas actually kind of rewards you for not engaging in killing monsters. So even if there is good loot that drops from the monsters inside of the trial, more often than not, the silly thing is that you kind of are rewarded for not engaging monsters, because if you don't engage monsters, like for instance with the death crystals, you're better off just not engaging monsters. You just want to run crystal to crystal and click on the crystals as fast as you can, right? And in a lot of the runs, especially like to find the exit and various others, your goal is to not kill anything. Right? You actually don't want to engage anything if you don't have to, because that means you could potentially lose honor, and losing honor means that you obviously are going to die, right? You don't want to lose all your honor at any point. And when you get to the bosses, you want to have like maximum honor in general, because of course you don't want to fail the boss battles. So in most of the cases, you actually kind of actively avoid the loot. And on top of that, I've also noticed that the keys themselves, like when you're actually doing the runs, often come with debuffs. So you generally kind of avoid the keys and the positive things as well, because if you get the keys, if you go after like the gold keys and the silver keys, they almost always come with crippling debuffs that can just straight up brick your run. Like for instance, one of the debuffs that will absolutely murder you is the 25% movement speed debuff, which makes it almost impossible to complete the death crystals unless you have some type of movement speed on your boots. For instance, like if you don't have movement speed on your boots and you get the 25% movement speed penalty by accident, you're not completing the death crystals. Like you don't have enough time at that point. There's a couple of them like that where literally they're spread out in such a way where without a decent amount of movement speed and the ability to get to the objectives, you're just not going to complete it in time. And I really don't like the debuffs just completely bricking the run. Like I like the debuffs making it difficult, but I don't like it where the debuffs are completely and utterly breaking the run. And you might be asking, it's like 37 minutes now, and why am I spending so much time talking about the Trial of the Sekimas and the Chaos Trial when there's so much more to the game? Well, to get your Ascendancy points, you have to do these. You have to do the Trial of the Sekimas to get your first 2 Ascendancy points. You have to do the Trial of Chaos to get your second 2 Ascendancy points. And if you're looking to get your second set, your third set of Ascendancy points, and your fourth set of Ascendancy points, you are definitely going to have to do more Trial of Sekimas or Chaos runs to get more of your points. In fact, the third set of points, you're definitely going to have to go in here. I believe you need to do at least a 3-floor Trial of Sekimas. And I think you need to do at least a 10, I think it is, on the Chaos run. So it's got to be a 10 Chaos run. And they're both just a pain in the butt, to be perfectly honest. Moving along from this stuff, let's go back to town for a second. And let's talk about some of the other negatives in the game. First off, the game itself is actually pretty nice. I did find this entire system here to be rather jankety and somewhat cumbersome, which is the whole desert map in Act 2. I like the moving fortress thing. I thought that was cool. But, like, choosing where your fortress goes is kind of hard to understand at first and a little janky. And before you like, get on my case about this, it's really just, like, too many extra button pushes. I mean, it's kind of silly. If you think about it in a certain way, like, if I go to the waypoint, as an example, and I choose a specific place to go. Like, say I wanted to go to Mastodon Badlands. Right? I clicked on the waypoint. I clicked on Mastodon Badlands. We had 2 clicks. We're there. Right? In the case of the Dreadnought, like, the movement of the Dreadnought is somewhat jankety. Like, first off, you have to figure out where the Dreadnought is going to go before you can understand, like, what the hell's going on. So you choose the map. Usually you talk to Second Masala, you choose the map, and then what you have to do is you have to figure out where it is you're going. So, like, if I want to go to Mastodon Badlands, then I have to travel to Mastodon Badlands location with the Dreadnought. This moves the entire Dreadnought to that location, and then once it moves to that location, then I have to wait for it to stop, and then I have to get off at Mastodon Badlands, which takes me basically to the same place that I was going anyway with the waypoint. Like, it's just... And until you get the hang of how the stupid Dreadnought works, like when you first get here and you're trying to figure out how to do these quests, and it's telling you to go to specific areas and you can't figure it out, it's just kind of dumb. Eventually, when you do figure it out, and I'm kind of explaining it to you now, so hopefully you'll get the hang of it, you're basically moving the entire city to various locations, and then you're getting off of the city at those locations. And so you have to know that you're moving the Dreadnought to the locations. These little, like, golden doodads here are all of the locations that you can move the city to. And once you move the city, then obviously that's pretty much it. Now, the other odd thing is that the city also, of course, moves. So half the time I was trying to teleport back to town via a waypoint, which I probably should have just used my town portal. But I was trying to, like, travel back via the waypoint, and, like, I'd be at some random place, and I would go to look for the city, and because the city doesn't sit still, like, I was like, the city used to be here, and I was like, oh, where's the city? And then I'd have to, like, hold my mouse over every single one because I would forget where the city was. And then finally I would remember that the city was, like, over here. Oh, there we go. So the city moves to each one of the locations, like, as you move the city around, which it's not like a huge negative or anything, but it is something that it does kind of get poopy. Like, in the beginning, the first time you're going through Act 2, it does kind of, like, wear on you a little bit, constantly having to move the Dreadnought around, figuring out where the city is. My suggestion is just use your portal to get back to town. Don't use the waypoints, because it's much easier. It's just way easier. By the way, a little tip, you can control-click on the hooded one to identify items. It's actually kind of nice. So if you control-click, it'll just automatically identify all the items in your inventory. I think that pretty much covers the negatives. I think there's maybe one more we can talk about. So, let me go to a new character, and we'll talk about this negative for the new characters. So, the new characters, when you start a new character, you get basically, like, one little skill gem. They might give you, like, one little support gem, and then eventually you get another skill gem. And my problem with this is that it just doesn't really feel good. I played the game through completely one time with a regular character, and I started to play the game completely through with a new character with access to all of my equipment. And one of the things that kind of bothered me was the restriction on the gems and support gems and basically everything that you were utilizing in this tree. So as a low-level character, they only start you with 2 support gem slots, and they basically give you access to a very small number of skills. And it doesn't really feel very good. My first playthrough, it felt very restrictive, and I was really only capable of using a couple gems here or there. I constantly had to scrimp and save to get access to the skill gems that I needed to be able to do what I wanted to do. And to give you an idea, I mean, looking at, like, a level 2 skill gem, you can see I don't really have access to a large number of skills. I can't really do, like, a large number of things with these low-level characters. And then on top of this, like, when it comes to support gems are also obviously very useful. But when you utilize support gems at a low level, you also don't really have access to a large number because they only give you the first tier. So there's actually 3 tiers, and this is the second tier, so that doesn't count. So they only give you access to basically these here. And on top of that, they don't really give you a lot of support gems to begin with. So not only are you artificially limited in the number of support gems that you can have access to, but you're also limited to a specific quality of support gems as well. And the reason why this is a negative is because there are so many fun combinations and things that you can do that are just restricted from you at the start of the game, which don't really make a lot of sense. When I started to do a second playthrough and I started to play around with a character who actually had access to all of the support gems and all of the skills and could actually play around with everything that they wanted to play around with, it made the game so much more fun. I'm not saying it made the game easier. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is it made the game just more fun in general because you were able to utilize the skills in the ways that you wanted to utilize them. As an example, let me pull up my Frostbomb character, and I'm going to show you what I mean. So this particular character is it's a second generation. So it's a second generation character, and I started to play around with various abilities like Frostbolt. Well, Frostbolt is really fun when it has 3 slots and you can utilize various skills with it. So I'm utilizing Fork. Actually, Fork didn't work with it. I think I remember testing that, and Fork just didn't work. So I was using Deceleration, Scattershot, and Arcane Tempo. And let me give you an idea of what Frostbolt looks like on this configuration. Now, Frostbolt isn't the most amazing skill, and it doesn't do the most amount of damage, but with the correct support gems, you can definitely have a lot of fun with it, almost like Contra-style firing of your abilities, which is just really neat in my opinion. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to have fun, which is something that they kind of just restrict from you in the beginning of the game by artificially restricting all of your slots and artificially restricting the gems that you have access to, the tier of the gems that you have access to, the level of the skills that you have access to, and so forth and so on. And so things like this just aren't possible at an early level. Like, you're not going to be getting access to most of the stuff early on. You also can't have access to 3 skill gem slots early on. You're also probably not going to even have this many support gems to even be able to do this either, because early on in the game, they're pretty stingy with the support gems. They're very... they'll give you a lot of skill gems, but not as many support gems, which has been my experience. Although there have been several patches, and so maybe they've fixed it a little bit. But as you can see, like, just having fun with something like this with the Frostbolt, it's kind of neat just to play around with having the ability to spam large numbers of them, decelerate them so that you can move with them. So the interesting thing that I'm doing here is I'm basically making it so that I can stack the Frostbolts on top of each other. So if you move backward when you fire, you increase the distance between each row. However, if you move forward when you fire, you could basically fire them at the exact same point, as you can see. And so what I'm doing is I'm basically just stacking them all together in a nice, neat line. So when I approach a group of monsters, like for instance, if I approach this group of monsters, I can condense the line together to the point where when the line hits the target, it just instantly freezes anything it touches, which is just hilarious. Frostbomb is another fun ability that is also affected by this. So, I mean, you can do this with any ability. But take, for instance, Frostbomb. Frostbomb has the ability to do things like this. Not something that you're really going to be able to do early on without, like, for instance, 3 gem slots, support gem slots, and 3 support gems, which is a little bit more difficult. The second time I played through, I got the feeling that I was just being ridiculously artificially restricted to a degree which kind of took a lot of the fun out of the game. The fun of the game is in controlling and specializing the abilities in various ways and making fun combinations. Does having those frostbolts like that make my character overpowered? Not really. A lot of those things that I'm doing, like Scattershot, reduces the damage of the ability. Spell Echo, for instance, or Deceleration doesn't really like give me any additional damage to the ability. And then on top of that, I'm getting more cast speed, but like I'm not really making the ability that much more powerful than it was before. I'm just creating unique ways in which I can use it to my advantage, which you really can't do the first time you level up because number one, limited slots, number two, limited support gems, number three, like limited skill gems, and so as you're moving forward and trying to figure this stuff out, like it's just a little bit more of a pain in the butt. 49 minutes of negatives. Let's see if we can think of any more before I move on to the positives, because there's a lot of positives. We've already covered the skill tree. We've already covered the trials, which I think are really poopy. I think that's it. I think I've covered pretty much all the negatives that I can think of, unless I left some out. Now, let's start with the positives. So I actually do have kind of like a little bit of a list here, but I'm going to probably build onto this. The positives are actually pretty good. I love the art style. The art style of the game is absolutely amazing. I don't know what it is about this art style, but it's very reminiscent of Diablo 2 Resurrected. It is probably one of my favorite art styles right now. I don't really know how to explain it. I love it the way the characters look. I love the graphics. I love the icons being big. I love the fact that, you know, like big items actually take up a large amount of space, which is absolutely amazing. You know, I love that in general, like the inventory has like a pop to it, you know what I mean? Like when something's in my hand that's kind of interesting looking, it actually looks like it's interesting looking. The items actually look the same on your character as they do on your panel, which is also kind of cool. So like you see this is like some sort of little monk robes or whatever. And I put it on, and I'm obviously wearing those monk robes. I have the hood. When I put on the hood, I am of course wearing the hood. Like it's pretty translatable to like whatever it is that you're wearing. And the art style is pretty good. Like, as an example, let's pull out one of these ridiculous armor plates. Like, we've got Ghost Wraith. And as you can see, it actually looks like what it states. And, of course, I have this ridiculous thing on me right now. Let me turn this off so you can actually see my character. And the items actually do look pretty clear, you know, one-to-one what they actually are. Can I not put this back in here? Get back in. Oh, wrong item. Get back in there. There's some pretty cool plates too. Like I can't really wear all of these, but I can wear some of them. Like this one is like a chainmail, instantly fire to frostbolt so you can't see. And they're kind of nice. Like the graphical items, the actual icons of the items, and the actual graphics on the character do match, which is really neat. So you can probably make some pretty cool graphics that way. Not only does the like overall art style is it very interesting, I really like the overall like darkness of the way that the game looks, especially when you're in specific areas. Like let's go back to Act 1. And let's go into the manor. I believe it's Ogham Manor. Ogham Manor is a very interesting art style. Quite dark. You obviously feel like you're inside of a building. The lighting is very interesting, shining like the moon or the sun through the top of the things. The monsters are very much so dark and in shadow, as you can clearly see. And when you cast spells that have light to them, it's very obvious that the spells have lights and they light up the hallways and the corridors. I mean, overall, it's just an absolutely amazing experience as far as the art style is concerned. And then we can move on to the actual combat. So the combat is very, very fun. Very reminiscent of Diablo 2 in a lot of ways. I actually did some testing on like the size of the effects and stuff like that has to do with how it might translate into a Diablo 2 game. And believe it or not, the size of the effects is actually very similar. Despite the fact that the game seems to use a completely different system, you know, like when you look at the abilities, it says meters or metras, which is kind of silly. But like the meters is not analogous to yards. So like when you look at the actual numbers, 0.9 meters is not the same as yards. I actually tested this with a couple abilities to try and see like how large a meter is, to kind of reflect that onto Diablo 2. And basically what my results were is that 1 meter was actually larger than a yard in terms of the game mechanics for Diablo 2. So when you think of an ability that is, say, like Conviction is 13 yards, well, that would be probably something like, I think it's like 18 or 19 meters or something like that. Or sorry, I'm sorry, the other way around. About like 9 or 10 meters. So about like 9 or 10 meters would be 13 yards, like for Conviction. In fact, I have a lot of abilities that have like a presence on them, which is 6 meters, and 6 meters translated out to about 10 yards in Diablo 2 to give you kind of like a frame of reference. Now, speaking of that, like the combat in the game just feels amazing. Not only do you have the ability to dodge, you have the ability to use WASD controls if you want to. You can also potentially use the keyboard and mouse. All of it feels absolutely amazing. And you have essentially like unlimited control over your customizations of how the controls work. You can obviously hold shift key to hold your character steady. You can bind tons and tons of different options down here in the bottom corner to use your characters. Obviously, you can use click, right click. You can use the center key to fire off an ability like your center mouse button. You can also use, control click, control right click. You can use control QEW, like whatever it is you're trying to set up for. You can definitely set up multiple keybinds. There is a large number of keybinds in here. I think if we go into the inputs, there's 13 keybinds, and you can pretty much bind them in whatever way you want. As you can see, I have control left click, control right click. I'm using 1, 2, F. F is pretty handy. I also have control middle click, which control middle click is a whole nother ability. And it's not bad at all. On top of this, the customization of your character is absolutely amazing. And that's why I said earlier that, like, the early game where they restrict the customization of your character is so bad, is because later on when you get access to customizing your character, when you start getting access to those additional skill slots, when you start getting access to all of the support gems, and you're able to interact and, like, change the abilities in a myriad of ways to make them exactly as you would like them to be, the game becomes more fun and interesting in general, because you are, of course, making it so that you can have your character the way that you want it, right? And that's really what's important, is being able to customize your abilities in the way that you want. Let me give you some examples. So let's hop over to my mercenary, and I'm going to show you how I've customized my character the way I want it, right? Now, one of the traps that I fell into originally, which was a silly trap, was I fell into a trap of thinking that I had to follow the abilities as they were presented to me. I know that sounds kind of weird, but I had to follow the abilities in the way that they were presented to me. And the truth of this is that you do not. You do not need to follow the abilities in the way that they're presented to you. And I don't know how to explain that any more than to show you my character that I'm playing right now. So as an example, I'm currently using a skill called Explosive Grenade. Explosive Grenade is an ability that converts physical damage into fire. And for all intents and purposes, if you look at it from that perspective, you would say, oh, this is a fire ability. However, if you look at my damage panel, you'll see that I have a relatively large amount of lightning, a relatively large amount of cold, a relatively large amount of fire. I'm utilizing essentially all the elements. I also have a buff that constantly cycles on my character. You can actually see it on my back. And as it cycles with different elements, you'll see that the damage actually changes between those elements. So right now it's on the cold, so I'm dealing 4,421 cold damage. Now it's switched to the lightning, and I'm dealing 8,671 lightning damage, and so forth and so on. So basically what I have here is I have an ability that does whatever damage type I dang well please. So that means that my explosive grenades, which are mainly fire damage, will most likely freeze a target, which is actually really, really fun. Let me see if I can show you this on some monsters' faces. Actually don't know where I am right now. This is the entrance. Yeah, this is the entrance to the magma area. Okay. So when I use my grenades on a target, or I use an attack that is not cold related, I can still freeze targets, as you can clearly see. That was my explosive shot, which is also a fire ability. And watching the monsters freeze with an ability that is made with fire should tell you that your abilities can be whatever the way you want them to be. You don't have to be, completely limited by the way that the ability is designed. For instance, I even have a lightning grenade, which can also freeze targets. Not only does it freeze targets, but it also electrocutes them too, which I also find fun. As you can see, those guys shattered into oblivion. And this is really just due to the fact that the game is very open in the way that it allows you to design and build your character. As you can see, this guy got electrocuted, and he's also 77% frozen. And I've played around with this tremendously, utilizing different things. Obviously, you can increase the number of grenades. Like, for instance, you see this one has 4 versus this one has 2. You can also, of course, add multi-shot to things. You can add all sorts of various abilities. You can even create grenades that will poison monsters, as an example. I currently have a grenade right here. This is the scatter shot, or a cluster grenade. Which I have set up for no other purpose other than to apply poisons to a target. And to give you an example, let's go ahead and find a pack of monsters here. Here we go. Here's a nice pack. I'm going to go ahead and fire a cluster grenade in. And as you can see, they're all poisoned as well as they were all frozen. And the damage that is done by abilities like this, because of the way that the system works, by allowing you to customize the abilities in just about any way that you want to, you don't have to be restricted by basically the simple paradigms of, like, my ability is a lightning ability, therefore I am a lightning character. No. You can have lightning abilities that do fire. You can have lightning abilities that do cold. You can have fire abilities that do lightning. You can have freaking cold abilities that do fire. Like, it really doesn't matter. For the most part, when it comes to the way that the game functions, because of how skill gems work, you would look at them, and for instance, like if I pull one out real quick, and you look at your abilities, you're like, oh, look, gas grenade is a poison ability, or galvanic shards is a lightning ability, etc., etc., etc. Well, you can do whatever you want. You can have fireballs that dish out cold damage. You can have frickin' lightning that dishes out cold damage. There's actually a ring in the unique section that actually does just that. I think somebody may have grabbed it, or no, I have it on equipable. Yeah, somebody may have grabbed it, which is cool because we got like a guild stash set up, which, by the way, big positive. The guild stash is absolutely amazing. We've been constantly swapping items. We put equipment in here on a regular basis, and we just basically use this as one big swappy. If you guys are familiar with my Diablo 2 games, where we do our swappy games, this is basically, the guild stash is basically like one big swappy. Everybody puts items in here. People go through it to try and find out what they want, and then once they find what they want, they then, take it, and maybe they put more items in here that they find later that they think might be good for other players. I've actually been going through this, trying to keep it in good shape, like throwing away some of the stuff that's garbage, keeping the low-level stuff for the low-level characters, trying to make sure that we have some high-level stuff for the high-level characters and whatnot. It's absolutely amazing, right? But in general, like, this is just a huge positive. I really wish Diablo 4 and other games had like a swappy stash like that, like this one does. But when it comes to the skill gems, or the item that I'm talking about, there is a ring. I don't know if I have a picture of it. I was going to make a video on it, but I guess it's missing from the stash now. There is a ring that literally makes it so that you can convert all of your lightning damage into cold damage, which is really nice. It's a 100% conversion of lightning to cold. And let's see here if I can find it. Boop, boop. So many lightning rings. I think this is the wrong one. There's Path of Exile 2 and Path of Exile 1. It's definitely a crazy number of items in the original game as well. which I just really didn't enjoy the original game. But I guess I just don't have this item for the video. That's fine. I'm sure I'll find it again at some point. We're basically working on like a full collection of uniques, so it's pretty cool to have like the whole kinship working toward uniques. But it also means that sometimes we have items popping out of here. Speaking of unique items, the unique items have been a pretty big positive across the board. They seem to be very specific to certain builds, but for the most part, like it's been such a fun time looking at the uniques and thinking about what kind of builds that I can come up with. I've already started doing videos on a lot of these to try and talk about like potential options. Like this is like a minion freaking witch build, and then like we've got like crazy things like this one here, Widow Hail gives you 190% of your bonuses from your equipped quiver, which is pretty cool. So if you have like a really awesome quiver, you can get huge bonuses from it. This one allows you to get like just triggering spark when you kill a shocked enemy, which is really cool. There's just so many neat items in here that allow you to do some very interesting things. Like this is one I just found the other day, which allows you to sacrifice 12% of your life gain, that much energy shield when you cast a spell. So you basically just sacrifice 12% energy or life, and you gain energy shield as a result. So if you have a way that you can like offset that, you can just constantly refill your energy shield, which basically makes you immortal, right? This one also is really weird. It says enemies killed by anyone in your presence count as being killed by you instead, which is kind of crazy. Allows you to probably trigger your freaking on-kill effects. This one gives you like huge cooldown recovery rate on your abilities. It's called the Jingling Crest Shield, which I might actually want to use that on my Sorceress, actually, now that I think about it. Because my Sorceress is trying to get like some pretty crazy cooldown reduction. So let's actually hang on to that. I'm gonna put that right here. Overall, though, I think the uniques have been really well designed. Whenever I look at them, I'm always like, this is interesting. Like I could totally make a whole character around this particular effect. Like, for instance, this one here, the Corpse Wade Boots, gives you the ability to trigger Decompose on skill steps, which basically makes it so that any corpse that is on the ground immediately pops into, like, a poison puddle. And it's actually really cool. And if you hold the Alt key, you can go over the ability and you can take a look at it. And speaking of another positive, let's talk about the Alt key. So whenever you're looking at anything in this game, there is a lot of tooltips like built into the game. Like, for instance, let's say I find a unique item and I want to know about like a specific effect. So this has got like Bushwhack Boots, says physical damage is pinning. All right, so if I hold my Alt key and I go over here, I can look at pinning and I can pin that to the screen. And it says certain skills that affect allows damage to build up pinned. Once this build up passes the enemy's pin threshold, they are pinned, preventing them from moving or being moved for 4 seconds. So as you can clearly see, you can very easily look at items. You can take a look at various effects on those items, like evasion rating, your movement speed, your dexterity. You can look at pretty much any item and it will tell you like how this works, like what quantifies an attack. What is a projectile skill? This specifically says that spells are usually not projectile skills, but can be. So like a projectile is a moving attack or spell that usually impacts with targets when it hits them. When a group of multiple projectiles is fired from the same source. You know, basically everything in the game has these little things on them. Like, for instance, on the explosive shot, it's AoE, ammunition, projectile, fire, detonator, right? And then here you can even take a look at specific aspects of the way the ability works. And all this is really nice. Now, sometimes this is not properly set up. Like, for instance, if I take a look at critical hit chance, it says a critical hit chance, 5%. But if I hold my mouse over critical hits, it doesn't really tell me how critical hit chance works. It tells me how critical hit works. And the critical hit chance isn't really quite explained as well as critical hit is. It does say most modifiers to critical hit chance are percentage based. For example, gaining 100% increased critical hit chance would be 7% would be go 7 to 14, etc. But like, there's definitely some more detail that they could go into with how the critical hit chance works, talking about like the other aspects of it. For instance, they don't really cover that there are direct bonuses to critical hit chance as well. Like, for instance, if you have critical hit chance on a weapon, as an example, having it on a weapon means that it does in fact apply to the weapon's base, and then critical hit bonuses that you have apply afterwards. So in this particular case, notice how this has plus 2.56% critical hit chance. This is not a bonus to the after effect. It's not going to increase it, you know, like if you have a 100% bonus, it's not going to give you a 100% crit chance, right? But in this particular case, it does give you exactly what it states. It adds it to the base. So instead of being a 10% critical hit chance on this particular item, it's a 12.56% critical hit chance, which means that later on, when you have a 100% bonus, it's going to be 100% of 12.56%, not 100% of 10, which is a pretty big buff. There are actually some items in the game that have even higher amounts than that. Like I've seen items up as high as a 20% base critical hit chance, which is pretty cool. Especially when you consider that some of these items just have very low critical hit chance in general. Like for instance, you know, like this hammer only has a 5% base, which isn't really a whole lot. The campaign. Let's talk about the campaign for a second. So the campaign was really fun. I did have to play through the campaign twice. The first time I played through the campaign was the hardest, and that had to do with the artificial restriction of all of the support gems, the sockets, the skills, obviously me not having access to pretty much anything that I wanted to get my character set up with. And then finally, when I got to around like Act 1, Act 2 Cruel difficulty, I started to get into the point where I can actually access to Tier 3 support gems and actually have some fun like building my character. And I felt like the second playthrough of the, you know, Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3 with Cruel was much more fun than the first playthrough. And this just really had to do with being able to actually play my character the way I wanted. Which was fun. It was a lot more fun to be able to play the character the way I wanted in the second run through. Now, the actual story was actually really cool. It starts out obviously in Act 1 where you are like washed up on sea. You end up going to town and you're investigating the crimes of Ogham. Ogham is kind of a douche. You go to his manor. You basically spend a long time traveling through the entire place. Completing various quests, killing various bosses, and it's a very fun experience overall. I even had fun going through it a second time, even though I did skip all the dialogue and the cutscenes because I'd already seen them. But there's also just a ton of fun stuff to do on the way, which is also very important to talk about here. So as you're going through the area, you'll see these like little skulls. Like this one has a little plus symbol on it, which says it gives you 30 spirit. This one gives you 2 passive skill points. Like there's also little places you can go to kill specific monsters, gain specific bonuses. Like for instance, this one gives you 2 more passive skill points. There's places that you can go just to kill really hard monsters or get some good loot. And as you're traveling through these areas, it's actually really fun to go and find these monsters and kill them. And of course, you would definitely want to grab the ones that give you permanent bonuses, but I had a blast going through and finding all the different zones and monsters and like bosses and stuff that you could potentially kill, especially the optional bosses that were a lot of fun. There's also like little mini bosses that are rare monsters and whatnot. And as you go through each act, you're going to find more and more of these because there are little mini bosses all over the place. In fact, if you go down to like the underground, you can see there's even mini bosses and things down here as well. And speaking of the bosses themselves, they're a ton of fun. I've had very few bosses that were like unliked by me. I actually liked pretty much all of them. The only one that pissed me off a lot was the spear chick that was surrounded by her army, and they all like have their shields up. She kept getting stuck behind the shield guys, and I kind of felt like her fight was just really stupidly long and boring. With the way that they had it designed. And then what made it worse for me was that she kept getting stuck behind her shield guys, which I didn't really enjoy. There's a lot of skill-based gameplay with this. It's not just about like building your character in a very good way. Obviously, you need to dodge attacks. You've got to go through the process of avoiding, you know, like these big giant honking abilities that are going to kill you. And you know, like that's why they give you the dodge roll. That's why they give you the ability to, you know, like see what's going on in advance. And they did do a couple patches in the beginning. It was a little bit difficult to avoid things because of the character's size. Like he was getting stuck on hitboxes and things like that, which sometimes made the deaths, unfortunately, not your fault. But in the patches, they definitely have changed a lot of that. So they reduced the size of your character, and they also increased your like priority. So sometimes you can even cause monsters to like push them out of the way, which is really nice. I think one of the only problems that I've really had when it came to this game as far as like the combat is concerned is that sometimes and very easily you can be overwhelmed by large groups of monsters. So if there is a like a pack of like 30 monsters and they come up on you very very quickly, sometimes you can get very easily overwhelmed by them, which is a little bit of a problem, like pushed into a corner basically, which is kind of poopy. The biggest compliment I can make for this game is that it felt like putting on like an old pair of shoes. Like Diablo 2 has been a game that I've played for many years, like 24 years. And so I know it very well, inside and out. And when I picked up this game, like it really felt like I was putting on an old pair of shoes. It's like I feel like this game is a love letter to Diablo 2 players, or rather to Diablo 2 itself. Like whoever created this game really loved Diablo 2, and you can tell. Let's go over the crafting system. I do feel like the crafting system is a positive in this game, but it is something that kind of needs to be talked about. So let's do a quick overview of the crafting system real quick. And I'm going to talk about how you potentially modify an item, what you can do with it, etc. So let me pull out a white item here. I'm sure we've got a couple white items in here. All right, so here we go. We've got a pearl ring. And I'm going to pull up my currency panel here because this is how you potentially do this. So there's a lot of various currencies in this game. There are things that can add quality to items, like for instance, your blacksmith whetstones will add quality to basically any weapon. Your armor scraps will add quality to basically any armor piece, and your arcanist etchers will add quality to your wands, scepters, or staves. Now, you can also add sockets to items with the artificer's orb by just simply right-clicking on it and adding the sockets directly to the item. Your gloves, boots, and helmet can only have one socket unless you corrupt it and get lucky with a second. Your armor and your weapon can only have two sockets unless you get lucky and corrupt it with a third. Of course, you can also get unlucky. Now, with this particular ring, this is a cast speed ring, we're going to go ahead and we're going to try and craft this. So I'm going to use an Orb of Transmutation, which is going to turn it into a magic item. And 6 life regeneration per second. It's okay. Then we're going to use an Orb of Augmentation, which is going to add another modifier on it. All magic items can have 2 modifiers. So now we have 4 to 7 cold damage. Not really amazing, especially considering you can see I have a lot higher than that on my rings. Like I have 2 to 47 lightning. I've got 8 to 12 right there, so that's way better than 4 to 7. And then, of course, on my gloves, I've got 20 to 31. So it does go a lot higher than that. Now, at this point, you can create it even further. Now, I don't think I would necessarily want to keep going with this ring. So let's see if we have a magic ring that I could potentially use to increase something that has good stats that I might actually get something better out of. Crafty, 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 craft. Just looking for like a potentially good item instead of like a trash piece of equipment. So this one's kind of interesting. 27% cold resistance, 17% cold damage, and regeneration rate. So let's do that one unless we got something better. Oh, I like this one too. Fire res and all attributes. Let's do the fire res and all attributes. So in this particular case, we're going to take our currency and we're going to use a regal orb. Now, regal orbs allow you to add one more modifier, and it turns it into a rare item. So in this particular case, with this particular ring, the Azure Ruby of Ring of Comet is going to become a rare item. And now we have 2 mana per enemy killed. What a terrible roll. Now, at this point, you can add more attributes to this. The Exalt Orbs will allow you to add more attributes. You can add up to a total of 6 until the ring looks something like this, or something like this. These are my 2 beautiful rings that I'm currently using. And at a certain point, you can, of course, max out the number of attributes, at which point you can corrupt it. So the corrupting process is pretty much the last thing that you usually do after you have completely like capped out the ring. And it can have unintended side effects. So it does basically one of three things. The Val Orb will either A, do something positive, like add a socket or add an implicit to the item that wasn't there before. It will B, do nothing, or it will C, reroll effects on the equipment or like literally brick the item entirely. What it does for the item could be bad, could be good, could be it doesn't. It's never really quite. You're never really quite sure what it's going to do to your item. In fact, like let's just for the sake of the video, let's gamble, shall we? So I'm going to take my beautiful ring here. Let's take a screenshot of it before we start. That way we can know exactly what it is, right? So we're going to take the ring off, and I'm going to go ahead and corrupt it just for you guys. Hopefully it doesn't break my ring. All right, so we just corrupted it. Now we're going to pull up the original image of the ring, and I'm going to compare it side by side, shall we? So the ring is 13, 1 to 4, 8 to 12, 64, 10, 22, 9. So in this particular case, I got no modifier whatsoever. So I corrupted the ring, and I got the B option, which is nothing, right? So I got nothing. Let's see if we can try that again, and let's see if we get anything better. So let's try this ring, which is also really good. Let's do a screenshot of this ring before we corrupt it. And now let's pull up the screenshot of the ring and let's see if I got lucky or I got bad. Looks like I also got nothing. So as you can see, corrupting items doesn't always lead to a positive result or a negative result. Sometimes it just leads to no result whatsoever. So in this particular case, I just corrupted the rings and I got absolutely no result on both of them. Lucky me, I guess. I mean, it's better than getting a bad result, I suppose. I guess. Let's do it one more time. Let's see if I can get a bad result or a good result. So here's a helmet. Let's go ahead and corrupt this. Oh, okay, so that was definitely a bad result. So in that particular case, you could see that it completely re-rolled the stats. I lost the resistances and various other things on the piece of equipment. This was one that I wanted to replace anyway, so I'm not even really too mad about it, because quite honestly, it's an evasion energy shield, and I'm not really an energy shield build, so I was planning on replacing that at some point. So that was the bad result, where it basically re-rolls the effects on the item and kind of just like completely changes it from what you were using before. In this particular case, it's took away the resistances, which was not what I would have really wanted. Added some odd effects, which I don't really even think I needed. Just turned it into a helmet that I'll probably end up replacing a little bit sooner than it was later. The defensive system within the game is a big positive. I really like it. It makes a lot of sense, obviously. You build Chaos Res, you take less Chaos damage. You build Cold Res, you take less Cold damage. You build Fire Res, you take less Fire damage. You build Lightning damage, like Res, you take less Lightning damage. Evasion is very much so analogous to defense in Diablo 2 in that it basically just allows you to completely avoid strikes or projectiles, which is very nice. Armor is not quite as analogous to anything. And if you were playing Diablo 2, the closest thing that it would be is damage reduction. So damage reduced by, which is a physical damage resistance. However, it doesn't really function the way that damage reduced by does. Like if you have 50% damage reduction and a monster hits you, it's always going to be 50% of the monster's attack. However, in this particular case, if you read it, it specifically states that the higher the damage is, the less effect that it has. So it's kind of like a situation where the monster hits you for really hard, it doesn't do as much. But if the monster hits you for a very weak attack, it does a lot. And the higher that you have this, obviously, the better it will work. But it's definitely something that you don't want to completely neglect unless you have another way to mitigate physical damage. And physical damage does mitigate spells as well, as long as the spell is doing physical damage. So there are spells that do physical damage, and this will help against those as well. Blocking is very interesting in this game also, in that not only do you have a passive block, like in Diablo 2, but you also have a block where you can hold your shield up, kind of similar to Elden Ring, and also similar to Elden Ring in the way that it can be exhausted and your character kind of goes into a stunned state if you allow that to happen. The stats in the game are also very interesting in that not only do they have one effect, which is obviously like strength gives life, dexterity gives accuracy, and intelligence gives mana, but they also have specifically to do with like what you're able to equip. Like for instance, your gems, your support gems all have like a dex requirement. There is also a support gem capacity, which is based upon your strength, your intelligence, and your dexterity. And as you go forward and you try to utilize specific gems and equipment, you're going to need to fulfill those specific requirements for your specific pieces of equipment, your gems, your support gems, etc. So the stats really come into play similarly to the how Diablo 2 stats do, is that obviously in Diablo 2 you need enough strength to use your weapon, you need enough dexterity to use your bow, you need enough intelligence, or rather energy, so that you can cast your spells and so forth and so on. And it feels very good in that way. Another mechanic that's in this game is, of course, Energy Shield. An Energy Shield can be built or not on any character, which is really fun. In Diablo 2, you could obviously only really build Energy Shield on Sorceress, but on this game, you can build Energy Shield on any character that you want to build it on. If you want to go that particular route, there are tons of options on the tree for that. There's even options that allow you to regenerate your energy shield with your life regeneration if you'd like to go like stack as much life generation as possible. Spirit is also a very interesting mechanic and is very good for minions. So with minions, when you're running a minion character, you basically have the ability to summon your minions based on the amount of spirit that you have. There are also a lot of spirit abilities, which are basically like passives that affect your character in various ways, and those are actually really fun as well. But the spirit system seems to be designed more so for this character than others, and I do believe I still have my scepter in here. And do I have my gem as well? My skill gem? So where's the skill gem? Basically, there are a whole bunch of skills that are based around things like summoning the undead. In this particular case, here's my skeleton warrior. And my skeleton warrior does require spirit. So for every skeleton warrior that I add, it does reserve some of my spirit away as a result, allowing me to summon forth skeletons to do my bidding. And I did not mean to take that out of there. Now, in the case of this particular character, having a large amount of spirit means that you can obviously have more warriors. So in this particular case, I'm only able to summon one set of warriors because I only have one set of warriors worth of spirit. However, as you level through the game, you're going to obtain more and more spirit. There are also items that contain spirit on them, and there are also like amulets, equipment. There's unique items that have large amounts of spirit that you can potentially use. I've seen a shield that has spirit, an armor that has spirit. I've seen amulets that have spirit on them, and of course, stacking your spirit as high as you possibly can means you're going to be able to enhance the size of your army, and increase it just ridiculously so, right? So eventually you're going to have just, in Diablo 2 style, like freaking 40, 60, 70, 80 minions, on the screen at any given time if you are able to get your spirit up high enough. As an example, if we take a look in the panel, I don't know if we still have that unique body armor in here. It's been a little while. I'm pretty sure Bruzak has been using it, and pretty much anybody that gets their hands on it probably uses it for their witch early on. It's a body piece that literally gives you 100 spirits from the get-go of the game, which is just absolutely amazing. There's also a shield that has a relatively large amount of spirit on it, as I said earlier, and then there is there's an amulet that actually has some pretty good spirit. I don't know if we have the shield. I doubt we have the shield yet. The unique items are definitely something that I'm having fun collecting and learning about as I go forward, because you come across just some very interesting, unique items that are straight up build defining in the way that they allow your character to function. I mean, even just going through the helmets, when you find something like this one, which is when you leech life from a hit, allies in your presence also leech the same amount of life. So you could set up a character with massive amounts of life leech, and you could literally just feed HP to your allies in a party, which is just absolutely amazing. This one here, which is the Crown of the Pale King, it says Thorns damage is triggered by all hits, which basically makes it so that if you stack Thorns damage for your character, you can now apply Thorns damage to all of your hits, which is just freaking amazing. This one provides Unwavering Stance, which is your stun threshold is doubled and you cannot dodge roll. I'm pretty sure that's just a passive that's on the tree. So some of this stuff these uniques can actually be bypassed if you go get the passive on the tree, or you can do it the other way around. Eldritch Battery is really interesting. It converts all of your energy shield to mana. So wearing this particular item would mean that all your energy shield just becomes mana, which is freaking amazing. The game itself is probably one of the most fun games I've played in a while. And the question that probably is burning in a lot of people's minds is it better than Diablo 2? I don't think at the current moment it's better than Diablo 2 Resurrected. However, I think if they continue in the right direction with this game, there is every possibility that it could be better than Diablo 2 Resurrected at some point. It's moving in that direction. It has the right art style. It has the right feeling. The gameplay itself is just very fun. The creation of the characters, the customizability, all of it is very, very neat. Some of it is overshadowed by some very poor mechanics. Like, I don't really think that the Trial of the Sekimas and the Chaos Trial are very fun. And they need a lot of tweaking and a lot of adjusting to get them into the right place. And speaking of endgame activities, there are maps. Maps are actually pretty fun. And they are a throwback to Diablo 2, and something that I've always enjoyed about Diablo 2, and it put into a form that is basically just Diablo 2 on crack. Let me see if I can explain this in a way that makes sense. So in Diablo 2, one of the most fun things that you could do was find rare monsters that had specific modifiers. And these specific modifiers would represent a very unique and challenging circumstance. Like, for instance, you would run into rare monsters that would have things like extra fast or extra strong. You would have like conviction aura, or you would have might enchanted. They may have like crazy modifiers, like for instance, they might be extra fast or fanaticized, and then you might have a champion pack which is extra fast nearby, and they're just going like just absolutely crazy, right? The maps represent kind of like the idea of this in a very interesting way, which is essentially that you are creating a character that is, or a map that is going to be designed to have specific modifiers that are going to apply to everything within the zone. And then, of course, there's also a randomization that occurs as well. This is what the kind of like the map area looks like. And basically all you do is you create these individual maps. Like, for instance, this is one that has 51% increased amount of magic chests. Monsters have 173% critical chance and 35% critical damage bonus. So in this particular case, the monsters are all going to have that particular modifier, and then they're also going to have random modifiers that are going to happen within the map as well. So when you go in and you actually fight these monsters, a lot of the times, depending on how you do your maps, they can just be really fun. They're just really fun. And I can't really express that enough. There's just so much range and variation to the way that the monsters work. The challenge of the areas themselves, the combat is fun, and going in and having these like crazy adventures where you are fighting monsters that are just nuts in the way that they function is just great. It's just great fun. And a lot of the times I will actually use my crafting system. So the crafting system that I showed you earlier also applies to these maps. So for instance, if I wanted to create a map with a specific modifier on it, I can do that. I can go into my currency tab and I can start pulling out various things, and I can start messing with the way that this stuff works. So for instance, I have a tier 3 map right here, and I can go ahead and turn it into a magic map. So now they have the ability to poison me. And then I can augment it with a magic item here, and it says area contains additional packs of iron guards. So now I have a map that has 2 modifiers on it, and if I wanted to make it more, I'd need a Regal Orb, which I am currently missing. So with the Regal Orb, you can essentially transform the map into a rare map. You can also use Val Orbs to corrupt the map, and all sorts of other things. And once you have like an absolutely crazy map, you can come in here and you can put this in, and you can actually go play it. This is one of the maps here. So how does this work? If you die in there, you're done. You only have a certain number of times that you can go back to town. I was actually wondering why there's so many portals, and the reason why there's so many portals is because each one of these portals represents 1 trip back to town. So as you can see, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 portals, which means you have 6 trips to town. Once you use up all your portals, that's it. You can't go back in. There's also some pretty interesting mechanics on here, like bosses that you can potentially fight. There's towers that you can grab, and you can provide specific buffs to all of the things nearby. There are pretty interesting monster types and pretty interesting zones that you can find. All the areas are kind of unique and fun to play in. There's even some that you won't see throughout the campaign, which I'm pretty sure have something to do with the axe that we don't have access to. And speaking of the game as a positive, there's so much more that we haven't seen in the game so far. So as it is right now, the game is unfinished. It is in a state that is not complete. That is the definition of unfinished. What do I mean by this? Well, there's currently 6 classes, and they have told us that there will eventually be 12, so there are 6 classes missing. There is also a huge amount of features that they're probably going to be adding into the game as we go forward, which they've talked about some of those features. Skills, weapons, class ascendancies. They said that there was going to be 3 ascendancies per class, and there is only currently 2 ascendancies per class. So there's another 1 ascendancy per class, which we're going to have access to. And as we go forward, there's definitely a large amount to the game that still has yet to be added. There's also Acts 4, 5, and 6, which haven't been added. And it's kind of crazy. Like, I am excited for the future of this game, because not only does it represent a very, very fun experience, but it is also probably the closest game I've ever played to Diablo 2 in a very good way, that I actually enjoy the gameplay tremendously. I've been playing for 8 days total, learning the systems, having fun playing the game, and it's just a completely different experience from Path of Exile 1 entirely. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways here, is that Path of Exile 1, while it may not have been your cup of tea, and it wasn't my cup of tea, I didn't particularly enjoy Path of Exile 1. I wouldn't even go into this game with any kind of preconceptions whatsoever, because to be honest with you, Path of Exile 1 sucks compared to this game. This game is amazing. It has pretty much everything that you would ever want in an ARPG. A very wonderful crafting system, amazing combat, fun bosses, a very interesting campaign system and a story, end game stuff that's actually fun to do, equipment that's actually fun to craft. I mean, skills that are actually fun to play with and mess around with, support gems that actually make real interesting changes to the way that the abilities work and function, and it's amazing. I wouldn't give the game a 10 out of 10 though, because there are problems, and I've talked about some of those problems in detail. And I know I'm going to get flack for some of them. In fact, some people will probably tell me that I'm just, over. I don't know enough about the game, or I'm not playing with the mechanics properly. But it's definitely there. Like, the problems are definitely there, and the tweaks can definitely be made. Speaking of tweaks, that's one more thing that we can talk about, is the tweaks to the game. So in the case of this particular game, they've already started to do some patches, and some of the patches that they've done haven't really been the greatest. One thing in particular that they nerfed the crap out of was chance to cast abilities. This was one of the more controversial choices that they made. And they explained themselves. What they explained is that it was hard to balance out an ability versus bosses and also versus monsters, and so they tried to make a way to balance it versus both. And the fact of the matter is that they failed miserably. It still works in like some niche cases if you like build up energy gain and like you pull enough points and abilities and things like that to actually make it worthwhile. But for the majority of players who were using the cast on freeze, cast on ignite, cast on crit, cast on shock, etc., like they added this power feature, which is supposed to make it easier on bosses and not as easy on trash mobs. And honestly, all they really did was they just kind of killed the usefulness of it for the majority of the characters. You can still make it work on a high level character if you invest into energy in a very strong way. And what I mean by a very strong way is you are going to have to invest tremendously into this to be able to get access to it. You have to go on the passive tree. You're going to have to pull the points that have to do with energy on the passive tree. You're going to have to actually utilize things that are going to enhance the energy on the passive tree. And in fact, good luck searching for energy on here because it just pulls up energy shield the majority of the time. But there are things on here that have to do with energy creation. And for the life of me, good luck finding that one, especially since energy shield is actually, like one of the most common things on here. But as you can see, like this one right here, 25% chance for trigger skills to refund half their energy spent. Like if you really want to utilize these, you have to build into trigger skill bonuses. I guess that's probably a better thing to search for is trigger would probably be better. And that way you can kind of eliminate the energy stuff. So there are a lot of ways that you could potentially focus on getting more energy back or increasing the energy gain from meta skills, and you can fix it. But the sad part of the story is that like for the majority of the characters who were utilizing them for the fun that they created, they've been nerfed into oblivion. And for the few characters that can utilize those gems properly, if you build into them, like they're the only ones really getting any usefulness out of those gems right now, is the ones who have built into them, put the points in, are using the appropriate abilities, have the energy increase, like have spent tons of passive points on the tree, and now they can finally use the abilities. I'm a little bit worried about this style of nerfing stuff in that like they're basically just kind of killing the fun in very unfortunate ways. And I don't know if that character, like all of the characters that were using this, were really all that overpowered. But there was one in particular, the Comet Sorceress, from what I understand, that was like really overpowered with this particular setup. And I suppose that's who they were trying to nerf. But overarching nerfs like this that hit everyone like the same way are kind of crazy. Like, because you got to think that, like you don't use a nuclear bomb, you don't use a nuke to hit one target, right? So like if you have like one person inside of a city of like 10 million, like that's literally that you need to take out, like you don't hit him with a nuke and take out the other 10 million people in the city as well. And that kind of feels like what they did. It feels like what they did is they took out everybody who was having fun with that ability just to nerf one build, right? Which is kind of silly, in my opinion. And I really do hope that in the future we see a lot less of that with this particular game because it's kind of poopy. It's a little poopy. I was utilizing cast on freeze when I first started, and I was having fun, like having the comets come down on the target. I was focusing around freezing. I pretty much froze everything. And to give you a kind of an understanding of like how they nerfed it and how bad it was, as a character that freezes literally everything that I come across, I would get maybe like 1 or 2 comets per group of monsters, which isn't really all that big of a deal. As a character that after the nerf, who was still set up for freeze, I was getting 1 or 2 comets per 3 packs of monsters. So I would fight 1 full pack, no comet, 1 full pack, no comet, another full pack, no comet. And then finally, after 3 packs, the 4th pack would have like 1 comet come down. And it was not anywhere near as good as it was before for like the majority of the players using it. It just feels bad because it's a fun ability, and I feel like all they really did in this case was they took the fun away from the characters who were having fun with it, because one character was exploiting it, and that's just the wrong way to go entirely. The trade system. Let's talk about the trade system too. I really wanted this to be like an all-inclusive video covering tons of different stuff, and so let's go ahead and pull up the Path of Exile 2 trade panel. The Path of Exile 2 trade site is absolutely amazing, and I absolutely adore the Path of Exile 2 trade system, if I'm being perfectly honest. This is the Path of Exile 2 trade system. And in here you can search for anything you specifically want. Like, say for instance you want a crossbow. Let's go ahead and like put in crossbow. So we're going to type crossbow, all right? And then we're going to add in adds cold damage. So we're going to do adds cold damage, not to attacks because we want just add cold damage. There you go, adds cold damage. And then we're going to do search. Actually, you know what, let's do a minimum of 25. And bam. So now we have a bunch of crossbows that have a minimum of that specific stat, right? And we can refine this even further. So let's say we wanted to also have one that has skills. So all levels of projectile skills, and we want a minimum of 4. And not only is this system actually functioning within the GGG sphere, but it also allows you to directly whisper people and send a message, you know, to them specifically. So for instance, let's say I found one of these that I wanted to actually grab and pull in. Like, this is kind of neat right here. 38 to 65 cold, 2 to 69 lightning, +4 all projectile skills. That's pretty nice. Pretty nice little combination there, right? And then you could just send a direct whisper to him. It literally just does it for you in the game. It will literally automatically message the guy. It tells you whether they're online. Person messages you back, said sure, invites you to group, you complete the trade, done, move on. It's like one of the most seamless systems I've ever seen in my life. It's so easy to search through. Not only is it so easy to search through, it's also so easy to post your items. Unlike on Diablo 4, where you got to go to a separate website, you got to like post your item on the separate website, put in the stats, make sure everything's set up, put in a price, all this other crap. On this particular game, all you got to do is just go to your tab that has like your items. You put an item in here and you mark it for sale. It doesn't even really take a whole lot. You just drop the item in, you right click on it, you can put either it's an exact price or negotiable, you can put what you want for the item. There's tons of different types of currency, and then you literally just set up the item. Once you put it in here, it's on the website and anybody can have access to it. That's literally it. You're done and you move on. And if somebody wants the item, they send you a message, and you'll get a message at some point that says such and such wants to buy your item. You go grab the item from the stash, and you complete the trade. It really doesn't take a whole lot of effort. I would highly recommend that anyone who enjoys Diablo 2 play this game. In fact, I'd highly recommend that anyone who enjoys Diablo 4 plays this game. This game is absolutely amazing. It's one of the best ARPGs that's come out in a decade. You know, Diablo 2 I don't think really counts because Diablo 2 obviously has been out for a very long time, and Diablo 2 Resurrected is just a rehash of Diablo 2 with some minor updates. And although I do think Diablo 2 is currently still better than Path of Exile 2 by a small margin, Path of Exile 2 is on its way to possibly becoming one of the best ARPGs ever. It's got the potential. It has the potential. It can work in that direction. Now, how could it potentially fail? It could potentially fail if, and this is a big if, the developers kowtow to the original Path of Exile 1 players. I feel like the Path of Exile 1 players represent the direction that this game should not go. A lot of people didn't enjoy Path of Exile 1, and there's good reasons for it. It was not necessarily the best game. There are players that still prefer Path of Exile 1, and to those players I say go play Path of Exile 1. Path of Exile 2 is an entirely new beast. It's made in a way that is amazing. And the last thing that we need is the developers kowtowing to all the Path of Exile 1 players and pushing in that direction, because honestly I think that would just ruin the game entirely. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals joining me for these videos, even though this one is almost 2 hours long. I will obviously be playing more, so I hope you guys will join me. The kinship is having a blast. We've been having fun filling up this guild stash, making new characters. Chunks is online, freaking Leon's online, Devron's online, Khan's in here, Bob's even playing. I mean, it's pulling freaking kinship members out of the woodwork that haven't played in a long time, and they're popping on to play Path of Exile too. So if that doesn't tell you something, I don't know what does. It appeals to a wide audience of people, not just a smaller audience of people. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching. Be sure to hit that like button and the subscribe button if you enjoy the content. And as always, keep watching.